you're coming.
So, I know I've been away for a while, I've not been very well, but I'm back feeling okay, and I do mean that. So, as always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review, and I'm going to be catching up in all those tasty, delicious alternative timeline for all mankind episodes that I've missed out on. I'm going to be posting the videos as I normally would, one episode at a time, instead of posting a big mishmash collection. So make sure you subscribe and you've got the notifications turned on so you don't miss it. And let's get to it. So, episode 403 of For All Mankind opens up with Margot still somewhere in Russia after being arrested in a riot at the end of episode 2. She's basically been taken to a prison for troublemakers, so in the bigger picture there's some unrest in Russia, and you've got to wonder how this is going to spill onto the world's political and space stage. And we find out pretty much straight away that these disturbances are getting reported on all over the world, particularly in America, because there's been a coup in Russia with the military taking over, and apparently the US knew that this was coming and done nothing. The man leading the coup is called Rushenko and wants to go back to the older, more colder, war, harder line days, less open to westernness, in fact opposing it directly. And we do see the ramifications of this all the way across Earth, reaching to Mars as well, because on Mars, Earth lets them know that they haven't heard from their counterparts back in Russia for quite a while, so the Americans don't know what's going on and are kind of reaching out to the Russians on Mars for any information. And they're not really getting anywhere, as the Russians that are on the Happy Valley base can't reach home either, so they're wondering where all this is going to go as well. They're all still planning to recapture the asteroid, so they're going to need both crews for that mission, and they're going to need them to work together. Back on Earth, we catch up with Dev Ayesa, who we haven't seen since season 3, and he runs into a woman who runs into him on his private beach. And because we haven't seen Dev for a while, we do know what's kind of been going on since the last time that we've seen him. We know that Helios has had to adapt since losing its sort of priority solo mining contracts, and him also losing his position within the company he created as well. And this is all going to come full circle before the end of the episode. Kelly and Adela are pitching a drone research project to help find first signs of life on Mars, at least below the surface, and they seem to have everything in place apart from their money, but their plans aren't really gaining traction with any investors. Back on Mars, Miles is still getting messages from home, but his wife isn't happy and wants to move to help to improve the family circumstances back on Earth. Like most characters in this show, things haven't exactly gone to plan for Miles either, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. It seems working in space and a steady family life don't go hand in hand. Miles is settling into his new life on Mars with the back alley boozers and parties galore. And I said it in my earlier reviews that this show is really setting up the two sides in the divide on Mars here, between the tops and the bottoms, the have and the have-nots. We find out things like toilet paper and tampons are something that people need to seek out on the black market, and that's why it's thriving, and this is what really draws Miles in. We find out that the barman who runs the still in the black market on Mars has been doing it all across the solar system for many years. So the early days of the black market go back to the early days of space exploration. Miles wants to help Ilya, but the guy just isn't interested until he finds out Miles' status, that he can access parts of the base he can't. So he does change his mind and take him on board, at least for one job, to get a part to repair the still. This isn't really the seedy underside of Mars it was first presented as. Most people want general stuff, as I mentioned, not drugs or anything too sinister or suspect. They're just trying to get along with the bare necessities, or at least without them. So Ilya is more a sort of Red in Shawshank Redemption rather than Tony Soprano, I guess. So does that make Miles Andy? I don't know. What do you think? As I said, they need Miles to get a part to fix the still to keep the alcohol literally flowing on the planet. So Miles needs to get in over his head and cause a potentially huge international incident because the part that they need is in the Korean section of Happy Valley Base, which is a no-go for the Russians, Americans, or anyone else that isn't a North Korean. Their section of the base seems to be more militaristic than the others. It isn't as big, it's very bare, there's no sort of comforts or luxuries there, and this is something that proves to be a big turning point for at least one of the Koreans and Miles later on. So taking a huge risk with a major political incident and huge ramifications, not just for him, but everyone on Mars and back on Earth, Miles decides to cross into the Korean section and get this part and save the day and keep the booze eternally flowing. So he comes up with a reason to get in there, faking an alarm in order to repair the atmosphere system on board. But once he's in, he evacuates the North Koreans out, which does raise some attention, and he straight up gets caught straight away and pretty much confesses to what he's done and the reason for it. Now, although this is kind of played for small stakes here, as I said, if the Koreans decide to do anything about this on a formal level, this is completely going to change the landscape for everyone in the show. But what we find out is the Koreans, or at least some of them, are interested in the black market trade, and they hint that there's maybe more going on with them than first meets the eye. But meanwhile, back in space, as I mentioned earlier, they're still trying to catch the asteroid and are training for it. Ed is practicing docking for the next mission, and as they start to get into position, his hands start to go numb and he can't operate the controls. He hides this fact by letting his second Svetlana take over, as he says that she needs the experience and the practice, which is a pretty obvious move. I think it's only a matter of time before his secret's out. But Ed's not the only one on the shuttle or the spacecraft with health issues. His Russian second Svetlana is also having her own problems with injuries sustained on the job, mainly to her back. Ed notices this pretty quickly and invites her to his garden at night to get some of the wacky-backy. He tells her that he's trying to follow on with Kelly's work growing plants on Mars, and of course he's been growing weed, as I said, and he gives her some to help with her constant back problem. Speaking of backs, back on Earth, like and subscribe by the way, it took me a while to come up with that one. Actually, it doesn't matter. Margot is being processed back in Russia and is being interrogated by a member of the new regime. He wants to know what she does in Russia, and her cover story as a middleman for Russian and American corporations isn't really sticking. It seems like the new power doesn't want any opposition on any level, and she's being held as a kind of political prisoner. They also have her stuff in the card with a number on it the mysterious woman left, first hinting that something wasn't right in Russia all those weeks ago, and they've uncovered that the number is linked to a KGB director who's opposing this new regime, and Margot doesn't really know anything about this, so is sort of stuck in the middle of a situation that she doesn't understand, and a bigger plot that is yet to reveal itself as well. Later on, during the interrogation, another colonel comes in, releasing her, apologising for it all, after the first lot have been chased off, and by that, of course, I mean killed. And I did initially think that this was all some sort of psychological trap to lure Margot in, like a setup, but it turns out that's not the case. The guy that's taken over the interrogation tortures the first guy in front of Margot, so I guess she's really being liberated here, and the new guy wants information on the woman who gave Margot the card as well. So it seems there's a lot of plates spinning in Russia, and although there might be someone in charge, it doesn't appear they've got the full control of the range just yet. So Margot's in a situation from bad to worse without really knowing what's going on, being tortured for information that she doesn't actually have and doesn't actually know anything about, but they don't know that. She basically gets black bagged and taken away to a farm in the middle of nowhere, where we finally meet the mysterious woman there. And it turns out that she wants Margot to work on the Russian space program in Star City. And this woman is the head, or at least the new head, of the Russian space program, which, from what we can tell, now seems to be involved with the KGB, or at least fronted by them. So Margot is actually back in the game, and I kind of predicted that that was going to happen, but I thought it was going to be on the American side. So it's not really what she wanted, and I keep saying it, but this is going to have huge implications for the rest of the season. She's not going to be able to resist the temptation to reach out and contact people that she's formerly involved in, and the Russians aren't really going to be able to keep her involvement secret for very long. And this episode is really beginning to set up how things are going to tie together for the rest of the season. Kelly and Aida go to see Dev, and he's impressed with what they've got to offer, but he doesn't see a return in the investment on finding life on Mars. Kelly gives him the big hope, big future sell, but he's not interested. And before they leave, Kelly confronts him and challenges that he's lost his vision and now only cares about cash, which I suppose is true of most millionaires and billionaires. You know, the guy's a businessman, so it isn't a great argument if you ask me, but it seems to work, whatever. But Dev decides he wants to help them in order to gain control of Helios back, sort of kind of similar to what Steve Jobs done with Apple all those years ago. So although I don't find Kelly herself or this aspect to the story that interesting, I like that they've paired all these three characters up together, and it's a bit more interesting seeing them interact and come on with a purpose for the show. Aida goes to see Bill, who we still see is in a wheelchair. Aida goes to see Bill from the first few seasons, who it turns out is now in a wheelchair. It seems that this is from the bombing at the end of the last season, and you can tell that the guy's really changed. She tells him about her issues going back to NASA and that this is her confronting them for the first time, about who she is and what she wants and what she can be. They do talk about Margot, and it seems that this is quite a divide here between people who think she's an absolute traitor to her country and other ones giving her the benefit of the doubt, not judging her. So Bill is the one that comes down on the traitorous side, and Alida is the one that sort of says, well, we don't know, they might have had something on her, she had to do what she had to do, let's just let bygones be bygones and move on with it. As I said, Dev wants control of his old company back and crashes the Helios board meeting, basically coming in, swinging his dick, shooting his guns in the air, and going full Greatest Showman in order to get his company back. So in effect, he can do what he wants, and that's what he does, firing anyone that previously opposed him when he was in charge of the company all those years ago. But yeah, it's good to see Dev back in the picture, but I'm not entirely sure that he's going to be a good guy. It doesn't seem that there's anyone that he has to answer to now that he's got this new position, so I've got to wonder, has Kelly made a deal with the devil? Now, as I said, I'm catching up with my reviews. I have seen them all, and I'm going to be posting the rest later on, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and you don't miss it. I really did like this episode more than the first two, in the fact that I say it's starting to tie things together, and I like this whole Russia situation on Earth and how it's going to impact not only the people there, but the people on Mars and probably the people on the moon as well. I do hope that we see some of the moon colony in this season, but I highly doubt that that's the case. But as always, I want to know what you guys think. No doubt you're already ahead of this video in terms of watching the episodes, so you can post spoilers in the comments below, that's perfectly fine. But where do you think all this is going to go in the grand scheme of things? Is the new Russian regime a good idea or a step backwards? Is Kelly making a deal with the devil, and is Ed going to get discovered? These are just some of the questions I have, but I want to know what you guys think, so let me know below, or you can reach out to me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, @TheGeeksReviews. And as always, my name's Al, thanks for watching.